Hi, I'm Professor Angus Kress Gillespie, your host on East Brunswick Television. And I'm here today with author Michael Aaron Rockland, whose latest book is The Other Jersey Shore, Life on the Delaware River. Rockland is a professor emeritus of American Studies at Rutgers University. He's lectured in 24 different countries, served as a United States cultural attaché in both Argentina and Spain. He's the author of some 15 books of scholarship, memoir, and fiction. This current book is a kind of poetic love letter to the Delaware River. His book is full of stories featuring a river of scenic beauty. He covers just about everything, including the river's bridges, towns, and islands. And it's my pleasure to welcome Michael Aaron Rockland to our studio today. Michael, I read your book, The Other Jersey Shore, with a great deal of interest because I've always been a fan of the Delaware River along the Jersey side. When I was much younger, I did a lot of tubing along the Delaware. And now, in my more senior years, I'm a big fan of visiting Lambertville. I'm particularly fond of the Golden Nugget Flea Market, and I love the restaurants. And it's kind of corny, but I particularly enjoy just sort of sitting on a tree stump on the shore in Lambertville and watching the river flow by. It's majestic, and I'll see the sun setting on the New Hope side, and the water will be brightly sprinkling, and it's very moving. It's even awesome, corny as that may sound. But in any event, this is not about me, it's about your book. And so I want to ask you, how did you get the idea for this book in the first place?
Came out of a couple of experiences. One of them was riding through Pennsylvania one time and seeing signs that said Jersey Shore, 2 miles, and thinking, what Jersey Shore, 2 miles? I'm in the middle of Pennsylvania. There is a town, and it's got a long story as to how it happened, called Jersey Shore. But I've always been a river mountain kind of a guy rather than a sandy beach kind of a guy. I can go to the beach once a year, but I'd much rather be in the mountains or on a river canoeing or something like that.
What was the hardest thing about writing this book?
I guess to keep myself out of it. That is, to keep my own opinions and my own feelings and whatever out of it. When you admire something, as I admire the 331-mile Delaware, I think New Jerseyans, as a rule, do not know the nicest part of the state.
Yeah.
They go to the beach, and I got nothing against beaches, but to me, the beauty of the state is along the Delaware River. The prettiest towns, you mentioned Lambertville, Frenchtown, and the other towns along there are just, I think, the prettiest towns. And also, I think there's something about when you're sitting on that stump looking at the river, there's something very peaceful about rivers.
Yes.
There's something very peaceful, I think, about something that continues to flow.
Yeah. So the hardest part was not to overindulge in personal anecdotes, to try to be objective.
I would say so.
Yeah. How did you go about gathering the photographs for this book?
I've never done this before. I've never thought of myself as much of a photographer, but for the most part, I took the pictures of myself because I was meeting people, I was going places, I was learning stuff. But one of the pictures, I think, which is really extraordinary, is the one that's on the cover of the book. There's a fella named David who owns a plane which is 83 years old. It's a 1941 Piper Cub. Anyway, I asked him, would he take that picture? And he said, sure. And he took it from up high. That's the Delaware Water Gap,
Yeah.
which to me is the prettiest place in New Jersey. And most New Jerseyans have never laid eyes on it.
What are the three distinct parts of the Delaware River?
Oh, well, there's the part which I enjoy the most, which is the northern part, where the river is running at speed and is very beautiful. When you get to Trenton, you've got an 8-foot drop off, not a dam or anything like that. It's just the water on rocks descends very quickly 8 feet. But it made it that ships coming up the Delaware could not go any further. And then if you continue further south, it's really interesting because the river makes a sort of a left turn, if you can still think of it as a river, makes a left turn, and now you have Delaware Bay. The bay, having made that left turn, connects with Cape May. You could argue that there's really only one coast surrounding New Jersey.
What was the most fun part about writing this book?
I think the part that I enjoyed most was the history that I got into in several chapters. For example, the chapter called Washington's Crossings, with an S. Americans know all about one of those crossings. But within a 10-day period, he made 4 crossings, and the other 3 were just as important in terms of giving Americans the freedom, the notion that it might be possible to win this war. I mean, up to then, we lost all the battles. It looked hopeless.
Well, as I recall, the one that people usually talk about, Washington's Crossing, was when Washington crossed the Delaware River the evening of December 25th, the morning of December 26th, 1776, and he defeated the Hessians at Trenton. This was the big breakthrough of the Revolutionary War. But tell us a little bit about the other 3 crossings.
Well, first of all, the story in a way begins when Washington is in Fort Lee, New Jersey. He's escaped from Manhattan. The British are now, he's watching the British take over Fort Washington, which is where Washington Heights is today. And he makes it all the way across New Jersey, just in front of the British Army, which is chasing him all the way across New Jersey. He's got to get to the Delaware. When he gets to the Delaware, he's got to have some boats to get his army across to Pennsylvania.
So number 1 was an escape from the army.
Exactly, and it was just as hard as the other, rounding up the boats.
Yeah.
People imagine that with any of these trips that they all went over together. Well, no, they went over in about 5 or 6 stages.
Yeah.
And the British are coming, and he's trying to get people across the river and the boat to come back and get more people, and not only people, but horses and wagons, heavy things, etc. So that's that's the number 1 crossing, really, and it's just as important.
And which is number 2?
Number 2 is the one you're referring to, and here's a picture of it.
Yeah.
The painting hangs in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. If one were to turn to this picture for accuracy, I could fill pages and pages of what really happened and what it really looked like.
Yeah. Well, what about crossing number 3?
That also has a great surprise element, because when Washington lands crossing number 2, they're 9 miles from Trenton. So not only did he have to get his army across in stages, he had hoped to attack in the middle of the night. He can't attack until 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's already light out, and this is a disadvantage, or he thinks it's a disadvantage anyway, to be launching this battle against the Hessian mercenaries of the British who are in the barracks in Trenton. As it turned out, very luckily, the wind was blowing in such a way that it was blowing the snow and sleet into the faces of the Hessians. They couldn't see anything, and they couldn't tell how big Washington's army it was. So it was a very short battle, and basically the Hessians gave up. There were a couple of injuries on the American side, a couple of injuries on the other side. But I think the important thing, and this is trip number 3, is Washington's got a whole almost 1,000, the figure normally given 918 prisoners. And so in some ways the battle itself is not that important. What's important is that these guys have given up, and now they have to march the 9 miles with him back up the river to where the boats are. And now they've got to cross the river, but this time with just about twice as many people, and the British army is closing in, and so it's really something that they
number 3
get
is
up there.
Number 3 is after the battle.
Yeah, that's right. Number 3 is indeed it's all part of number 3. But almost nobody knows. Everybody thinks he defeated Hessians. That was the end of the Hessians, and that's all there was to it. But the fact that he captured almost 1,000 of the enemy, gets them over to Pennsylvania, keeps them as prisoners of war for the rest of so they're not fighting. Many of them, by the way, then became American citizens, these Hessians.
What about crossing number 4?
Crossing number 4 is he's going over there again to the other side, the Jersey side. But this time he directs the army directly to Trenton itself, takes over Trenton, and just as he's going to get across, there's a bridge across a creek that I've canoed called the Assunpink Creek, and he gets his army across that bridge and sets up cannon up on a hill, and now the British are closing in. They want to cross that bridge, and he just keeps firing at them. And there's an argument among historians: is this the Second Battle of Trenton, or is this not to be considered a battle? It was a pretty consequential battle. The British give up for the night, and they stay on the south side of the river. The Americans are on the north side. Now where Americans always get confused is they put this together with crossing number 2. And the fact that what Washington now does is build bonfires along the south side of the Assunpink Creek, and then in the middle of the night departs for Princeton while the whole British Army is asleep across the river. And then we have a second victory, the Battle of Princeton. By the time the British get there, they've already departed from Princeton with another victory, and they're marching to my town, Morristown, which is where they spend the rest of the winter. But most people somehow got it all glommixed together.
Michael, when was the Tox Island Dam first proposed?
About, the middle of the 20th century, and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth as to whether
what were the
they were gonna
arguments?
build it or not.
What were the arguments for and against?
Well, it came out. The main argument came out of the big flood of 1955, which was the most serious flood of the Delaware ever. Not only on the river, but on some of its tributaries as well. I mean, a lot of people died. A lot of property was destroyed. And then, yeah, let's build a dam, let's not build a dam. The Army Corps of Engineers were so sure they were going to build a dam that they went in there and removed all the people who were living, some of them in historic houses that had been there since the 18th century. Removed them, knocked down the houses, or just whatever.
What led to the cancellation of the Tox Island?
Ironically, the final cancellation, because there were about 20 cancellations and 20 affirmations. The final one was when President Lyndon Johnson said, look, we don't have any money for extra things. We've got to fight this Vietnam War. We're still doing it, obviously. And so that's what really canceled it, money. If they had built the dam just a couple of miles or so north of the Delaware water gap, there would have been a 40-mile lake behind there. And you could say, wow, 40-mile lake, isn't that great? And we got to remember at that time that the Delaware Water Gap was one of the main vacation places in the United States. There's no remnants of it there now, but there were many, many hotels, and some of substance. President Teddy Roosevelt went there for a vacation, that sort of thing.
So moving along, tell us a little bit about the construction of the Morris Canal back in 1831.
Oh, well, there are two canals that cross New Jersey. I decided to include a chapter on the canals for two reasons. One, they're both connected to the Delaware River. Okay. But the other canal, the Delaware and Raritan Canal,
1834.
Right, 1834, much more intimately connected because they're taking the water of the Delaware at an altitude which is slightly higher than New Brunswick, and on a 22-mile feeder, they're bringing the water down to Trenton, where the actual canal was. Even though the feeder was used for smaller vessels and vessels that didn't have that much depth to them. But the Morris Canal, which you mentioned, while it's less connected to the river than the DNR is, and the DNR, look at the name, the Delaware and Raritan, that's where it goes. It goes from the Delaware to the Raritan. Okay. But the Morris Canal was the industrial wonder of the 19th century. I don't just mean in this country. I mean worldwide, people came over to see it. Why? Because they had to climb 906 feet up to Lake Hopatcong and then descend an amount of feet that was similar all the way to Jersey City. You know, it went for 109 miles. I mean, it was just it was a work of genius, really. As they say, engineers and folks and scientists came from Europe just to see the Morris Canal. Why? Because using water power, they're pulling these barges with, let's say, 80 tons of coal in them, meant for New York's furnaces, let's say, they're pulling them up a mountain or a large hill, and or letting them down that hill,
Yeah.
until they're in the next chunk of just water,
Yeah.
and then they reach another mountain and they got to go up as well. So there's a canal in England. It takes about 12 hours to get a boat through 29 locks up a hill, and it took 12 minutes to get up the Morris
More
Canal.
efficient.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's also talk a little bit about some of those charming towns along the Jersey side of the Delaware River. I'm thinking particularly of Lambertville, which I understand was kind of on the ropes back in the 1970s. What changed things for Lambertville, making it so charming today?
Yes, I can remember that Lambertville once meant something very different to me and a lot of other people. It was kind of just a big slum, and people passed through Lambertville to get to New Hope. They were really trying to get to New Hope. They didn't care about Lambertville. I mean, Lambertville was a disaster area, let's put it that way, which meant that all kinds of artists who don't have much money were attracted to Lambertville. And so I'd say the main reason happens because of the immense attraction. They're right on the river, they're right on the canal feeder, and the attraction of that to people in the arts in general. This is a common thing. Soho in New York, many places which were industrial areas which basically collapsed and were essentially almost abandoned, and now the artists came in,
So-
and they became totally different.
Let me mention a couple of other small towns. What are the charm of Stockton, say?
Stockton has that wonderful hotel, that great song from the Broadway musical. There's a small hotel with a wishing well, etc. Goes on. It's that hotel. And the wishing well is still there in the yard. It's over 300 years old, and I hope he does it. A gentleman has said he wants to buy it and
Fix it up.
yeah, because it went from being a hotel where people stayed and ate to only having a restaurant
Yeah, I
to
remember.
having nothing.
Yeah.
And now it's going in the opposite direction because he wants to have a real hotel. And that hotel, by the way, had its political significance because that's where all the reporters stayed during the Lindbergh baby trial. That's where they all stayed, and that was their headquarters. And that also brought a lot of fame to that particular hotel.
And what about the little hamlet of Raven Rock? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm charmed by Raven Rock. Raven Rock also is where, on an island just next to it, in the water, there's an island called Bull's Island, and they used the stream bed as the beginning of what they needed to dig by, what these poor immigrants had to dig by hand, just to create the feeder, because they had to, again, take the water from an area higher than New Brunswick, because how else would it flow downhill all the way? And so they take it out of that area just off Raven Rock.
Changing gears for a moment, I recall Joseph Bonaparte, the older brother of Napoleon Bonaparte, moved to America and he built a mansion on the banks of the Delaware River on the Jersey side. Tell us a little bit about that.
Napoleon's brother Joseph had most recently been the King of Spain, appointed by his brother, okay? And the Spaniards were now in full revolt to get rid of the French. And Napoleon is captured for the second time. So Joseph figures, I better get out of here. Well, the first of his mansions burned down, has been excavated. That is, there was nothing on the surface, but they dug down and found all sorts of things. The second home that he built is where he lived for most of the 20 years that he was in the Bordentown.
And this is a big house. It was the size of the White House.
Well, or even bigger. It was perhaps the biggest house in America at the time. After he abandoned the house the second time and went back to Europe, what fascinates me is you're coming through what you think are just plain woods. The things you come across. My favorite was a staircase, a stone staircase.
In the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere, in the middle of trees, coming down around 40 feet in the middle of these trees. And was obviously part of the second house. But also, you come across tunnels, and it's never been determined whether these tunnels were for delivery coming up from the Delaware, or it was for escape from the house, or maybe for both.
We don't know.
We don't know. And then another thing that I found this little bridge of bricks crumbling. You learn that he had 1,800 acres.
There's a lot of bridges crossing the Delaware River between New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Can you tell us about maybe your two favorites?
Right. You mentioned Raven Rock before, and at Raven Rock, there's a bridge across to Lumberville, Pennsylvania. And by the way, that's true all up and down the river, that you have bridges which are going from one town to another, and those towns then have a very intimate relationship. Okay, so one of my two favorites is the bridge restricted to pedestrians. Restricted to pedestrians who walk or bike, and you can't have any automotive vehicles on it, not even motorcycles.
Where's that?
From Raven Rock over to Lumberville, Pennsylvania. So my other favorite, actually, however, is of a different nature, and that's up very northern New Jersey, just close to the New York border. But what I find charming about the bridge, it's owned by a family, and it's a family business.
Is it a toll bridge?
It is a toll bridge. In fact, I wanted to really experience the bridge, so I drove across it and paid my $1, and then I parked on the side because I wanted to get a picture of it and to talk to the people there as well. And the pride that they have in this bridge is really extraordinary. It's their bridge, and it's not a public bridge. And nobody can tell them what to do. The state tried to buy the bridge, and they said, no, we'd rather, and we think we'll make more money collecting the tolls ourselves than selling the bridge to you.
Well, Michael, I want to thank you for participating in the show, Old Ways in New Jersey, and it's a fascinating book, The Other Jersey Shore. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay.
My pleasure, absolutely.